I'm going to
Well,
stand over there. Just
yes, and after that, we want a little feedback from the group.
Of course.
So then we'll let you start that first, Mike. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Wonderful, okay. Well then, welcome to our Libertarian Get-Together Supper Club. And it's great to see all you freedom lovers. And our guest speaker tonight will be none other than Mike.
We.
Talking on the topic of participation.
Yes.
Participation in what we want. Are we each individually, do we have a responsibility to participate in resistance and freedom?
Okay, so I guess how I want to start this off is, especially if you've been hanging around us libertarians for a long time, you might notice that there's a lot of cynicism going on. You know, like, oh, we're not going to get anywhere. We're not going to do anything. What can I do? Well, even if I do something, what does that do? So I go outside and I hold a sign above an overpass for Ron Paul. Ooh, and they come back home and get all irritated. Oh, I didn't do anything. It's a big waste of time. That's what most everybody says the next day, a couple days later, usually. But I just completely disagree. You did something. Guess what? You did something. Most people really don't do anything. But I want to concentrate this on a really good example of how one person can have an amazing difference on not only your country, but the world, and an amazing impact. So I was thinking of kind of starting this off by saying liberty is like pollen in a field of flowers. It starts off in one flower, goes everywhere, germinates and does everything. I chose that analogy because I kind of thought the whole it's like a virus is getting kind of old. And who really wants to think of liberty as a virus anyways? It's kind of a weird thing.
Better than a germ.
Yeah. So, start this off. Here's a quote from Samuel Adams, who is one of those individuals that had an amazing impact. There was really only two people before the revolution started that were really talking about the idea of independence from Great Britain. Really only two. Yes, there was like smatterings of people that would talk about it in a bar. One of them being Samuel Adams. He was a brewer and he frequented the Green Dragon Tavern in Boston, and he would talk about it. But that was about it before 1774. Come 1774, Thomas Paine came over from England, had no money, was broke, didn't even have a job when he showed up, and was just getting over, I think it was typhoid or something he caught on the ship. So, near death. But, so, again, those two individuals that were really almost talking about intense was Sam Adams and Thomas Paine.
Think you saw the light?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. He almost died on the ship. Maybe something.
Experience, saw the light?
Yeah, but Sam Adams, he was a little bit more of an intense speaker than Thomas Paine was, to the point where people kind of thought he was crazy. This guy would be ranting and raving, at the Green Tavern about, look at what the governor's doing, and the king, and, send them all to hell. People really thought that Sam Adams was crazy. And he was a fire starter, and quite possibly literally. There's some situations that Samuel Adams was around where there were some fires that got started. Let's put it that way. So, I'm not saying that he did, but he may have. But I want to concentrate this mostly on Thomas Paine.
Not spontaneous combustion?
Yeah, not spontaneous combustion. So, like I said, he showed up 2 years before 1776 is really when the revolution started. The war began in 1775, but we don't need to get nitty-gritty with the dates there. So, Thomas Paine's first job that he received when he came to America was the editor of the Pennsylvania Magazine, which was going under. Nobody was buying it. It was just this, the subscription rate was going down, to the point where the guy who owned the newspaper hired him, and every single article in the Pennsylvania Magazine was written by Thomas Paine under a pseudonym. What happened? The readership of that magazine went way up. And why was it? Because Thomas Paine was talking about things that people weren't talking about. He wrote numerous articles on women's rights, that women should be equal to men. That was something that was really unheard of back then. And of course, he was an abolitionist. That was something that, there were abolitionists in the North, but it wasn't, as fervent as it was before the Civil War. That it was, at that time, it was kind of, well, that's a Southern thing. We don't have to worry about it out here in Pennsylvania and Massachusetts and all that. Most people weren't really too concerned about it. But the thing that was so amazing about Thomas Paine is, I always think of this quote that is not from one of his contemporaries, but by a biographer of his later on. Thomas Paine wrote in language that the colonists felt, but not thought. And that has gone over my head over and over again. He wrote in a language that the colonists felt, but not thought. What does that mean? It means that they were all, seeing what was going on. The redcoats coming into Boston and just ransacking people's houses, looking for printing presses, anything that they could pin on you to say that, hey, look, we got these terrorists, and they did call them terrorists, let's arrest them, whatever, just to make it look like they were doing something. So everybody was pissed about it, but they didn't know exactly how to say it. And that's exactly what Thomas Paine did, starting with the Pennsylvania Magazine. But more proof to show that it was really just those two individuals is, I'd like to read to you a quote of George Washington's in May of 1775. This is very important to show you how influential Thomas Paine was. Keep in mind, the Battle of Lexington was in March, so a couple months even after that started. He was asked by a friend what he thought about the idea of independence from England. George Washington replied, again, soon to be the father of his country, "If you ever hear me speak of independence, you should set me down for everything wicked." Quote unquote, George Washington. All right? So this goes to show you how influential this one person was. And if that isn't something from George Washington, let's hear a quote from Thomas Jefferson. May 17th, 1776, a few months before Thomas Jefferson wrote Declaration of Independence. Again, asked about what he thought about independence. "It should be better to accept the bad one, meaning the government, from across the water, than to risk a new one at the expense of the conflict." Now he was still, only a few months before he wrote the Declaration of Independence, willing to say, well, maybe we shouldn't do this independence thing yet. Now, these are letters going back and forth to people. Maybe they just wrote this as so that they weren't going to be, served a warrant. That maybe they were worried that their letters were going to be read. Maybe they weren't. We'll never quite know. That's what I thought. That maybe that's why they were saying these things. But these are individuals. Let's think about what the governments in the colonies were saying at the time. In December of 1775, the New Hampshire legislature gave instructions to their delegates to the Continental Congress, on independence, obviously. "We are of the present belief that it would injure us. We totally disavow," unquote, "any connection to it." This is what they're talking about. "And that they should," now here's the big quote, "guard against every measure that would cause disunion." So they were, we don't know what we're going to do yet. Let's not worry about it. Delaware. Now this is a very entertaining one. Delaware said this to their delegates to the Continental Convention. This is a kicker. "In every act to be done in Congress, you will studiously avoid everything disrespectful or offensive, to our most gracious sovereign." Let's not offend the king. God forbid we do that.
That's what we were talking about coming down.
Yeah. We can't possibly, So now, in my opinion, this is when the revolution began. On January 10th, 1776, Common Sense by an Englishman was published. Thomas Paine originally put out Common Sense as under a pseudonym. Now, why did he do that? Nobody knew who Thomas Paine was. So if he sends it out as Thomas Paine, everybody's going, well, who's this guy, Thomas Paine, saying that we should be independent from Great Britain? Who is this? So he pens it as an Englishman to give it some sort of credit. That there is an Englishman in the colonies who's looking at this situation and saying, I don't like this none too much. Now, to show you, that this is really the spark of the revolution, in the first 3 months after it was published, there were 120,000 copies made. 120,000 copies. At the time in the colonies, there's about 3 million people living there. So, 120,000 copies, 3 million people. So, almost everybody read this. And if you hadn't read it, somebody you knew had. And additionally, on top of that, there were certain town hall meetings where you go to, and it would be read aloud to people who couldn't read. This is how much this went around. By the end of the year, there were 500,000 copies of it. It went everywhere, And I bring that to a point about how massive of distribution this pamphlet was, because a bunch of guys getting together in Philadelphia wearing white wigs and having more money than almost anybody else didn't matter to your average Joe. Your average Joe isn't going to sign up to the Continental Army because some guys in Philadelphia wrote the Declaration of Independence. That's not what does it. What did it was reading this. Exactly. Exactly what I'm trying to say. Now, obviously we don't have time, nor would I really want to sit here and read out all of common sense, but there's, some very, stirring quotes that is really what influenced people. You've got, the sun never shone on a cause so great. He's referring to what was going on in the colonies. That he was acknowledging what was going on at the time and that how important it was. And people are reading this again. Almost everybody. And that the cause of America is the cause of all mankind. Now, he didn't just write this very serious and, and look how serious. I mean, he kind of made this also so it's funny to people, too, that people actually kind of got a kick out of it while they're reading it. He made a lot of pokes and jabs at the king, because of all things, Thomas Paine hated a monarchy more than anything. He wasn't a big fan of government in general, but he definitely hated monarchies. In Common Sense, he calls the king the royal brute of Britain, the sullen-tempered pharaoh, and of course, the most insulting thing you could ever call a monarch is to simply call him by his first and last name. Multiple times in Common Sense, he is simply referred to as Sir George Hanover. Well, that did it. He's calling the king just George Hanover. What is he trying to say there? He's trying to say that he's just some other guy. Another wonderful part out of that is he says, what has the King of England to do other than go to war and give away places? He's just saying he's just some guy sitting in a chair, essentially. But now Common Sense has been published and sent out throughout the colonies. And the first quote after it's published, I think, is very telling. This is from a letter from Charles Lee to George Washington. Charles Lee ended up being general alongside Washington in the Continental Army.
The Lee family of Virginia.
Yeah. Relative eventually down the line to Robert, assuming.
Well-known family.
Yeah. So, in this letter from Charles Lee to George Washington, he says, have you seen Common Sense? You can almost reading it, just see the enthusiasm. I've never saw such a masterful, irresistible performance. It will, if I mistake not, give the coup de grace to Great Britain. In short, I own myself convinced of the idea of separation. Just very shortly after it was published. He probably read it before George Washington did. Keep in mind that Common Sense was also got across the ocean and was published in France too, and was very influential in the early stages of what would be the French Revolution, along with Rights of Man, which was published later on. So, if that wasn't enough if that wasn't enough to say that Thomas Paine had an amazing effect on the Revolutionary